Chapter 17. Thrice Upon a Mattress. The gingerbread house was complete and sat carefully inside its box awaiting delivery. The cake stood in the showcase room, listening to Pinkie Pie as she seemed to be both rehearsing her lines for the heartwarming pageant and speaking about everything she wished to do and see in Canterlot. She would not be with them until late tomorrow. The young mare would instead be returning for most of the day to the rock farm, where her parents awaited for their daughters, and the joy that came with their presence. Carrie looked at his face and turned back toward the doorway. The holiday cards all hung across the doorframe before him. He focused past the frosting that stood still upon his nose, and saw the card from Clyde and Roxy that hung there. The happy greetings reminded him that Pinkie's family was now, in some ways, theirs as well. The mares made little noises of surprise. Carrot looked up to see Pinkie showing Cupcake, something that had been growing during that long day. Ponies had been passing by, had been drawing in the frost to set upon their window. Even as the mares looked on, Pinkie Pie's friends arrived, each ready to trot to the train station. Pinkie motioned to them before they entered, each asking to draw a little representation of themselves in the frost. As the mares and dragon whelp entered, Cupcake motioned to them, winking as they each noticed the white dollop of frosting on Carrot's nose, imploring them not to give away that they saw it there. Carrot had forgotten about it. It still became a part of him, something else that she added to his life. Cupcake marveled at this, even as the giggles of the girls sent small waves of confusion over his features. All too soon there was a flurry of hugs, and with that, the young mares and their dragon escort departed to Cupcake Corner. The case watched them go through the big picture window. To their surprise, Pinkie Pie came bouncing back and smiled to them from the other side. As her scarf dangled around her, they watched as she too added something to the frost, smiled to them once more, and then bounded off into the snowy streets to the railway station beyond. Cupcake and Carrot lowered their heads and stared to the frost where dozens of little ponies seemed to march and dance. 3 ponies and an alligator stood close together, each one of them looking very much like the residents of Zucchini Corner. Cupcake leaned into him, let herself walk and sway in tune with her husband as they pondered this window. Soon the last of their customers with holiday orders had arrived, made their holiday wishes, and departed with their treasures. With that, they closed Zucchini Corner to the world, leaving only the magical lights sliding along the picture window to indicate their cheer. Wrapping themselves in their scarves, they went out into the cold and gray hearts-warming eve afternoon. The box containing the gingerbread house perched carefully upon Carrot's back. Ivory Script was living in her own small home now, her parents having departed for Philadelphia earlier in that year. The large mansion where she had lived all her life had gone up for sale. Now she lived in a more modest abode in the center of the city that she served. The long afternoon was spent in the pleasant company of their oldest friend, the mayor of Ponyville, so comfortable and relaxed in her presence that she let the gray come out of her mane and let the natural pink shine through. As time came for the rebuild of the gingerbread house, Cupcake led her into her own dining room. There, a beaming Carrot lifted the box to reveal the structure. As Ivory looked it over, she smiled to Cupcake, motioning to the prideful stallion that stood nearby. Cupcake nodded her head, once more acknowledging the dollop of frosting. Ivory embraced them both, carefully avoiding the frosting upon Carrot's nose even as she giggled, and confusion sat upon him once more. Promises were made. Ivory would come to Zucchini Corner the next evening and spend dinner with them. She would bring her gifts tomorrow, possibly having found what awaited her deep within the gingerbread house at that time. With another embrace, they left their dear friend and went out into the wintry afternoon. As they went, they stopped to listen to songs that lifted from carolers, or watch skiers at the big mill pond. They lingered just for a moment upon the snowy bank across from the mill, the very same spot where they had first spent pleasant time in the company of one another. The big mill wheel continued its cycle even as the building itself sat empty of ponies, as large icicles formed on the wheel and the festive greenery sat in each window. The air hung over the ice-covered river coldly. With a shiver, Cupcake leaned into her husband, seeking his warmth. Their scarves would offer little comfort against the frosty air. With that in mind, they were off to the big house that stood beyond the lampposts, leaning into one another as they went. As they entered the house, they were greeted, the flash of Cupcake's eyes telling all within not to mention the frosting that still sat resolutely on Carrot's nose. Carrot watched her family greet one another, interact with one another. Her brothers talked with him, and he did his best to make small talk with the powerful business pony and the army officer. His mother, now a dear matron to that family, greeted her son with a long hug and kiss to halfway to frosting. She too promised to come around to the bakery for dinner the following day. Still, it seemed somehow missed. As the activity swirled around the house, Carrot found himself in the kitchen, missing a certain older stallion who once stood there with him, making sandwiches and speaking in a rumbling tone. Can I just pretend as this thing is going on? Carrot is working in the kitchen, and he looks over his shoulder, and for a few brief seconds, sees a faint image of Corey. Before it got long, they were off again. As their extended family asked them to come around in the morning for breakfast and the opening of presents, they received their hugs and kisses. Cupcake could only giggle as the nieces and nephews her brothers had given them joined Ruby's in giggling at Carrot as they wrapped him in their forelegs. The confusion upon her husband's face only growing as the forgotten frosting caused the girl ponies to smirk and try to hide their expressions. The restaurant in the Hotel Seabiscuit had a wide buffet laid out. As they found their favorite table, the waiter could only jump in small surprise as he looked upon the face of Carrot, not knowing if he should mention the frosting or not. The room was loudly occupied, giving them some welcome silence. As the fire flickered to the large stone fireplace, the waiter brought them their drinks, removed the old plates as they slowly enjoyed all the flavors and temptations that the buffet offered. As they spoke, a band played in the next room. Little remembrances crept into their conversation. Before long, they found themselves sitting there with their hose on the table, sitting upon the hoof of one another. Carrot spoke about the small things. The week now ending, the new ovens, wondered if he would like to try the southwestern reaches this year for vacation. As he did, he stared down into the rose-colored eyes of his wife, lost in him as he had been for more than a decade. She lifted her voice to answer, asked if they would have to put in a lift to access the attic when the new codes came into play. Spoke about how nice it was to not have to adjust for uneven heating anymore. Wondered if they would let ponies who were not on their honeymoon use a certain bungalow that she remembered very fondly. As she did, he stared up into the green eyes of her husband, past the frosting that he was now oblivious to. They said goodbye to their favorite table, favored the waiter with a generous tip as the crowds began to arrive. Flint then left the restaurant in the Hotel Seabiscuit once more. To their surprise, it was actually a touch warmer than it had been when they escaped the chill over the river, and a light snow was now falling in the absence of the wind. It seemed like an excellent evening for a walk. They decided to enjoy that night, together, before they headed to the dance hall. It was almost too perfect. As the lights decorated homes shone out into the darkened night, they became forgiven for perhaps thinking that some divine being had made it that way just for them. The dance hall where they had first met had been rebuilt, a pony named Blues and his friends having once more filled the fabled structure with life and vibrancy. They slowly made their way there as flakes of snow gently drifted around them, and holiday music, mixed with dances and other songs of all varieties, lifted from the distant structure. They stopped as they went to peer over the holiday displays in the windows of the closed doors, swaying together as they leaned upon another tenderly. As they crossed through the snowy streets, they stopped to look upon the buildings, each one alive with decoration, candles, and lights. Cookie had been walking towards the next group of lights, their hues already falling over her, as she felt an alien sensation. The feeling that he was not near her, the absence of his body touching hers. She turned around and panned the street. There she found him looking down onto a perfect sheen of newly fallen snow. She watched him, saw that he was contemplating something that stood within the white. But as he saw Carrot plant himself in the snow in a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted his head to look at her, eyes squinting to catch her in the light of a lamppost. She trotted back, already knowing what she would find there, her heart leaping at the knowledge. He had, of course, found whatever hoof prints in the freshly fallen snow. He had selected the best one, the one that was perfect as he could select, and pressed his hoof into it. The two prints stood there before them, merged into one symbol. As she stood next to him, she wrapped it in a heart, the snow moving around her hoof pleasantly and yieldingly. They stood there, staring down into it as he placed her hand onto his shoulder, the flakes falling through the lamplight around him. Beyond them, music drifted out of Blues' new blue flag club, the old dance hall seeming to fill with the soft tones of notes that caught among the decorations that adorned it. As he began to nuzzle beneath him, draw her face along his, there was only one ornament that called to her, only one decoration that caught her interest. It was time. She took his hoof, wordlessly asking him to follow her to the windows in the nearby carousel boutique. Gently she drew him closer until the reflection stood upon the windows, the cakes staring back at themselves as the lights in the window pane caught them in a myriad of colors. He looked upon her smiling reflection. They appeared deeper in his own and tried to figure out what she was telling him. He arched his eyebrows and stared at his reflection deeper, growing slightly perturbed as he began to giggle. Cupcake lifted her hoof and pointed a wide grin to the dollop of frosting that still sat upon his nose. Carrot crossed his eyes, concentrating, and realized it was still there. As he realized why Ivory, their family in the big house, and the waiter had all been giggling and smiling at him, a blush came over his face. He had utterly forgotten about it. It had become just another part of him, something he had placed there and made a part of his life. She turned to her and tried to apologize for embarrassing her, but at once he was made aware that was not her concern at all, not in the slightest. She placed his hand on her hoof and guided down to her. Cupcake rubbed her nose to his, a small gentle motion sending the familiar and welcome feeling between them. She kissed his lips, moved up slightly and planted another kiss on his nose, then reached the frosting. She took a few tiny bites of it, nibbled at it, and slowly began to lap out. She let the warmth of her tongue slide up the space above his nose and under his eyes. He closed his eyes, felt her tongue as he traced her spot, let the sense of her closeness and heat of her body enter him. In a few motions, it was mostly gone. As he opened his eyes, he saw her standing there before him, a happy little smirk on his face. I have a feeling by now I've probably caused all the changelings in the audience to pass out from being too full. She stuck her tongue out, her cheeks and eyes wrinkling up into that beaming smile that long ago captured his heart. In an instant, he knew what she was doing. He knew that flavor must still rest upon her tongue. He moved to answer her offer to share it. As the flakes gently fell around him, he lowered his lips to hers. Together they chased the taste of frosting between them. Its flavor was so much like a sugar cube long since dissolved, one whose memory they had savored ever since. No, it was more than just that uncomplicated flavor. The ingredients of the frosting filled it with more than just a simple taste of sugar. It was stronger and more practiced. The frosting was much more than just sugar. Just as their love had only grown in that time. It had been beaten and whipped, but it had become that much better. They lifted from the kiss. Soon their heads were touching one another once again, the long and slow motions letting the familiar feel drift through the other. In a moment, any thoughts of dancing at the club fell away, becoming an instant impossibility. As they stared softly into each other, they both knew the welcome sensation that drifted from their heart to the heart of one another. An applause raised itself in her eyes, and tenderness grew in his. With that, they both knew in a happy instant to where they were being drawn. As the music drifted within the club beyond, they turned towards the street and leading back to Sugar Cube Corner and the warm bed within. She trotted ahead of them for a second and began walking backwards, staring at him with her little smile. She touched her nose to his once again, and turned and trotted ahead, his heart leaping at the sight of her bouncing, buoyant steps. He looked over her shoulder at him, her cheeks still lifting in her cutting smile, as she began to weave through the lampposts, asking him to pursue her. He began his little chase, Cupcake looking back to him as he slowly gained upon her, her laughter guiding him even more than the sight of the rosy mane, beautiful coat of his wife as the lamplight fell over her. He listened to her hoofs upon the cobblestones, the sound muffled by the snow, whilst her mane bounced as the snow swirled around her. She stopped and let him catch up to her for an instant. His lips fell to hers for a lingering moment before she giggled again, and once more, turning back to him as the smile grew. She brushed the snow from his mane as they gained to the doorway of Sugar Cube Corner. He did the same. She laid her head to his chest. He let her lie there, his head upon hers, until she lifted it and looked to him once more. With another inviting touch of their muzzles, they entered their small home. Their scarves barely made it to the drying rack before they were cantering up the stairs, Cupcake giggling as he went. The wonderful sound filled the stairwell as she removed her earrings. As she finished, she placed them on the table at the head of the stairs. She felt his hoof upon her, slowly tracing the length of her stifle, closely slowing down the length of her rear leg and back up again. She turned to her husband as he gained the last few steps, lifted his touch from her. She leaned forward to another kiss. With that, they entered their bedroom. A moment later, they came trotting back out again, both laughing. Pinky had opened the upstairs window to let the monster of the accidental deluge escape the Gregory. That bracing chill that filled the upstairs sealed it against their intentions. No matter. They would make their own heat. With the windows closed in all the upstairs room, and Gummy seemed to be safe and happy upon his warming rock, they trotted downstairs. The two trotted downstairs into the kitchen so quickly, filled with expectancy, that a few holiday cards fell from the doorframe with the rest of their air, not to be discovered until the next morning. They lit their ovens, left the doors open so that even as the room was left dark, the blue flames wafted about merrily in their confines. The fireplace in the parlor roared to life, and as the blinds were closed, the futon and its mattress were arrayed, the pillows carefully set. The light in the fireplace fell over them, joined in its illumination by the hearth-warming tree that stood in the corner. As it lay upon the mattress and pillows, the lights upon the tree shimmered over them, cast them in its colors. As they pondered it for a good long while, studying the tree and the presence beneath as they laid against one another, as they nuzzled their faces to one another and wrapped their hopes deeper and deeper together. The ornaments upon the tree, many as old as their marriage, were each filled with some happy thought or cherished memory that they knew and loved, and the times that they shared together. They laid their heads to one another, and thought of all the ponies whose gifts awaited them tomorrow, thought of all the faces that were attached to the names upon the little presents beneath their tree. As they did, it filled them with a sense of completeness, wholeness, a feeling that all was well in their world. They sensed that their love had indeed grown to include so many, that they were a part of a great circle, one that would be drawn here to their little home inside their bakery tomorrow. That, though, was tomorrow. This evening was for the two of them alone to share. Karen felt her lift her body, felt Cupcake place her forelegs across his shoulders. Her kisses fell on a wobbly trail up his withers and along his neck. The cadence and soft feel of her lips went across his cheek, before casting his ear between them. Slowly she nibbled at his ears, first one then another, not hurting him or biting them, simply letting her lips embrace him, her teeth touching to them just enough to show her affections. Karen felt wonder, a sensation of her light frame close to his, felt the heat of her body over his. With that, her lips once more applied kisses to him, her hose signaling him to roll to his side. As her mouth reached his neck, her hose ran along his chest. His shoulders and her teeth cut along the ancient bow tie slightly. It was weathered with age and perhaps fraying, but it was something she had given him. It was like the frosting she had placed upon him, a single line of white still showing where it had rested. It was something she had given him, so he kept it, cherished it. Gently she touched her mouth to it over and over, undoing the knot with small movements, carefully releasing it out for the amber neck upon which it lay. As she went, she first pulled at it, and then let her mouth find some spot upon his neck to lay a small kiss on it, before once more tenderly pulling upon the cravat. Guys! Cupcake alternate these motions in turn until it pulled free, the bow tie hanging in her mouth as she lay above him, her hose lying upon his chest as she gazed down over her husband. This is still a PG-rated fic, you know! Even as it dangled in her mouth, Cupcake touched her head to that of Carrot. She stood and smiled to him as the bow tie swayed in her mouth. CJ even chuckled wordlessly as he did. Okay, fine. I'll amp out the race. See if I care. Cupcake moved slightly, parted the pillows and looked across the Carrot as he sat up, settled his eyes across her. She dropped his bow tie across the pile of pillows, across the deepest part of the futon. As the cravat slid from her mouth, she looked deep into his approaching eyes, signaling to her husband the spot where he wished to be made love to. As he wrapped his forelegs around her, she leaned it backwards to him, just as he had done once upon a distant and happy time when flower had poured over them. As he rested against his chest, he touched his head to hers, as though striking her forelegs tenderly and gently, the awareness of his welcome touch sinking into her. In the kitchen, the blue flames fell down inside the oven, the room having met the temperature they had wished. The little sound of their homes, the small segment of the world they had built together over long years. These flowed into their parlor as she sank deeper into her favorite place, the place in the world where she felt most at home, safe, and loved. As she lay further into his chest, he wrapped her closer, let his lips fall across her neck once more, pressed to and gently nibble upon the space between her ears. In the long moments of their embrace, he felt her nudge him, press against him with their entreat to his actions. As Cupcake leaned backwards, she did so without hesitancy, trusting and knowing that he was there for her, feeling the sweep of his body as he lowered her to the mattress. Her head rested in his foreleg until her husband raised the pillow beneath her, care not placing her upon the cushion until it stood just so, being so that she seemed to hang above the mattress more than lay upon it. Her head tilted to the side, forelegs folded to her chest as he returned to face her, standing over her and looking upon her supine presence. "I love you, Mrs. Cake," he said as he grasped her offered hooves, standing over her and staring down into the rosy eyes he had long adored. "I love you, Mr. Cake," she answered, kissing his nose and browsing a waft of his mane from his gentle eyes. She sought his eyes, held his wandering hoof to her face for just an instant before ushering it off to its explorations once again. As his touch floated across her, she slowly rocked her head back and forth from one side of the pillow to the other, giving small sounds of contentment as he lingered upon her body with small circles and lazy patterns. She ran her hoof to his foreleg, reaching up until her own rested against his face. He leaned against it, let his head settle to her hoof. The warmth of the fireplace fell over them. Lights of the tree caught across them. They could not know, as they gazed upon another, this was the last year that children and toys would be absent under that tree. They could not know that this would be their last year, for many years that he would be able to sleep in on a heartwarming day, that soon foes would be calling to them at early hours, leaping onto their bed and begging to be allowed to go downstairs to the parlor. They had been through so much together, had suffered so much to be together. They had learned so much, learned from each other and from those who their love had brought into their lives. They had been made stronger, strong enough now that deep magic sensed their strength, knew they were ready for what would now happen. The magic knew they were strong, resolute, that he had planned and made strong strands against that which they had feared. The magic knew that they would accept loss, hardship, and could get through it all because they relied on one another. That they had made one long journey together. The magic knew they would never stop trying their hardest to live up to the tasks that had been set for them. That they never stopped loving one another, never broken down because of the strength they shared. The magic knew they were ready, that they could accept those whose lives they were so very different from their own as part of their lives, just as they had for a young mare who filled their house with love and laughter. The cakes were ready. They had shown themselves to be ready. The magic moved to answer their long-spoken invokes. They could not know that with their acts that night, the seeds that would be scattered would not find the barren rocks and sandy ground that had laid there over a long decade of doubt and uncertainty. They could not know that this night the deep magic moved within her, and fertile soils rich with life opened at its call. They could not know that the magic had awakened the two souls, and was ready to answer for the pleas that he had spoken, was preparing to make their love corporeal. The magic had waited, knew that for the two earth ponies raising twins would be hard enough, a test of their skills. And also know that raising two foals of different races, different from themselves, a unicorn filly and Pegasus colt would be harder still. There would be challenges for them. Heartbreak, fear, frustration, but also happiness, joy, and love. These emotions would more and more would greet their new lives that they created this night, while among them stood the tallest. The greatest among them was the love that Carrot Cake and Cupcake would drape over their foals over their long lives. Magic waited until they were strong enough, smart enough, and learned and loved. They never stopped trying. And now they had won. The magic conceded this round, so that they were ready for this task, and applauded them for their victory in the game of this. They could not know it was so very happy for them, and they had waited patiently for that much longer to bestow them with their prizes. They of course could not know these things as they lay there. All that happy Cupcake knew was that her husband was leaving soft kisses across her neck, her chest, her barrel. Her body arched, calling for this. But he was lost in the act of draping kisses along her. Instead, he denied himself that pleasure, and much longer to focus on the small, happy sounds that were lifting from her. She raised her hoof, called his lips back to hers. Suddenly caught in the firelight, and the lights that cascaded off the tree. Seeing it there, she pressed her lips to the ridges between his nose and beneath his eyes, grabbing the last of the frosting that still clung to his muzzle. With one more deep, long kiss, they chased his taste between them, while they cast upon their tongues. With another long, loving dance, Carrot continued to glaze affections upon his wife. As the feeling of his soft touch slid through her, she wiped her head across the pillow. As the taste remained, it was not a flavor of frosting that stood out most on her lips. No, a different taste jumped to the fore. A taste that Cupcake adored more than anything. They had been prepared in their kitchen over their lives together. Their happy lives. Their journey. Carrot cut down her body, his lips touching to her chest, her stomach, navel, and farther still. As Carrot did, he gathered a taste that washed the frosting from his mouth until it receded as a happy memory. No. A different taste sat there. One that was dearer to him than anything else in the world. A taste drifted across both their senses as Carrot lingered his lips across her. It was a taste sweeter than any in the world. A taste as wonderful and intoxicating as any meal they had ever eaten, yet at once was as familiar to each other as the feel of their shared touch and glance of their eyes. It was a taste of themselves, the taste of the friend, a taste of the lover, of the partner, of the husband and wife, of the two ponies who had shared the journey, a taste of this other self. It was a taste that they cherished and embraced more than anything else in the world, a taste that had long watched through them and still bound them closer and closer to one another. A sweet taste of cake. It's been fun thinking about how my journey through all this has gone through the 10 years. How I've created this character of Legend Bringer who likes to read stories from across the multiverse in his own little home, doing weird voices, pretending that the other ponies come by. It's been quite a journey, and I can't wait to do 10 more. I told myself that I would stop when I was 45. I am about 38 right now. I'm 38 right now. I don't know if that's true, but I've always told myself, if you guys ever see the main follow the question effect here, that means I'm done. I got no more stories to read. But there's somehow some part of me that looks on and thinks, maybe I won't stop at 45. Maybe I'll keep continuing. Who knows? As long as I'm having fun doing this, that's how long I'll keep doing. So, enough time for Rockaflation. Oh, and by the way, you guys want to know my review. It hasn't changed at all since the first time I read this. But for the past while, now it's time to move on from Reflection, and it's time to go back to handling an old enemy. I said I would only do Myken if there was a special occasion, or I found out something fun to do. Well, this 10-year special occasion can't be more special than this, now can it? Join us next time as we deal with Sailor Moon Legend of Zelda. Enjoy!